The story of Elisha, the prophet who resurrected a dead man even after he had died. Bible stories. Have you ever wondered how a prophet's power could extend beyond death itself? On the pages of history, few stories resonate as powerfully as that of Elisha, the prophet who performed a miracle even after his own death. This extraordinary account challenges everything we thought we knew about divine power and its limits. What makes this story truly remarkable isn't just the posthumous miracle. It's the unprecedented demonstration of God's power working through an ordinary man who started as a simple farmer. In the entire Bible, this stands as the only recorded instance where someone was resurrected through the remains of a prophet, marking it as one of the most extraordinary manifestations of divine power in biblical history. Have you ever felt that your ordinary life couldn't possibly be used for extraordinary purposes? Elisha's journey speaks directly to that doubt. Picture this: a young man working in his father's fields, completely unaware that he would become one of the most powerful prophets Israel had ever known. How does such a transformation happen? What does it take for God to use someone in such a remarkable way? But there's more to this story than just miraculous events. Through Elisha's life, we witness how divine power intersects with human need, how heavenly authority confronts earthly powers, and how God's purposes unfold through willing vessels. Have you ever wondered why some biblical figures seem to carry greater spiritual authority than others? What made Elisha's ministry unique among all the prophets? By the end of this video, you'll understand not only the extraordinary events of Elisha's life, but also discover timeless principles about divine calling, spiritual authority, and the remarkable ways God can work through ordinary people. You'll gain insights into how God's power can manifest in your own life, regardless of your starting point. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable story, I'm curious. Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt God's power working through you in an unexpected way? If you have, type 7 in the comments below. Your story might encourage others who are wondering if God can use them too. Part 1. From farmer to prophet, the making of a spiritual giant. Have you ever wondered what it takes to transform an ordinary person into a spiritual giant? What divine spark can turn a simple farmer into one of history's most powerful prophets? And how does God prepare someone for such an extraordinary calling? In the sun-drenched fields of Abel Meholah, during the tumultuous reign of King Ahab of Israel, we find the beginning of an extraordinary transformation. Picture a young man named Elisha, his calloused hands gripping the wooden plow, his face bronzed by countless days under the scorching Middle Eastern sun. He was the 12th plowman in a team of 12, a position that spoke of both humility and diligence. The scripture tells us in 1 Kings 19 that he was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he was with the 12th. But this ordinary day was about to become extraordinary. As Elisha guided his oxen through the fertile soil, an unexpected figure appeared on the horizon. It was Elijah, the great prophet of Israel, whose name struck fear into the hearts of kings and whose prayers could shut up the heavens. Elijah had just experienced a profound encounter with God at Mount Horeb, where he received specific instructions about his successor. The tension in the air was palpable as Elijah approached. Without a word, he performed a simple yet profound gesture. He threw his prophetic mantle over Elisha's shoulders. This wasn't just a casual act, it was heavy with symbolic meaning. In ancient Near Eastern culture, the mantle or cloak represented authority, identity, and calling. By this action, Elijah was literally covering Elisha with his prophetic authority. The impact was immediate. Scripture records that Elijah's response revealed both his understanding and his character. He ran after Elijah, his heart pounding with the weight of the moment. "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye," he requested, "and then I will follow you." This wasn't hesitation. It was respect for family bonds while acknowledging a higher calling. But what happened next demonstrates the completeness of Elijah's commitment. Returning to his oxen, he took decisive action, that would forever mark his transformation. He slaughtered the oxen, using the wooden plow as fuel to cook the meat, which he then distributed to the people. This wasn't just a farewell feast. It was a burning of bridges, a complete surrender of his former life. The tools of his trade became the altar of his sacrifice. Think about the magnitude of this decision. In an agricultural society, oxen represented wealth and security. The plow was essential for survival. By sacrificing these, Elisha wasn't just leaving his job. He was dramatically demonstrating that there was no turning back. This act of radical commitment set the tone for his entire ministry. The historical context makes this even more significant. This was during a time when Israel was deeply divided spiritually. King Ahab and Queen Jezebel had led the nation into widespread Baal worship, and true prophets were being hunted down and killed. Elijah's public declaration of allegiance to the God of Israel, symbolized by his response to Elijah's call, was an act of tremendous courage. What makes this transformation even more remarkable is its completeness. From this moment forward, we never see Elisha wavering or looking back. He becomes Elijah's faithful servant, learning the ways of prophetic ministry through humble service. The scriptures describe him as the one who poured water on the hands of Elijah, a phrase that speaks of intimate discipleship and willing service. As we consider this pivotal moment in biblical history, we see a profound truth. God's calling often comes unexpectedly, but our response determines our destiny. Elisha's transformation from farmer to prophet wasn't just about divine selection. It was about complete surrender and wholehearted commitment. But this was only the beginning of an extraordinary journey. As Elisha followed Elijah, learning and serving, he was being prepared for an even greater demonstration of divine power. Little did he know that his request for a double portion of his master's spirit would lead to some of the most remarkable miracles recorded in Scripture. How would this humble farmer handle the weight of prophetic authority? What would his ministry reveal about God's power working through yielded vessels? As we'll see, Elijah's journey from the plow to prophecy was just the first step in a life that would demonstrate the extraordinary possibilities when ordinary people fully surrender to divine purpose. Part 2. The double portion, a legacy of power. What drives someone to ask for double the spiritual power of their mentor? What kind of courage, or perhaps audacity, does it take to request such an extraordinary gift? And what happens when that request is granted? On a day that would be forever etched in Israel's history, Elisha faced a moment that would define not only his ministry, but the very nature of prophetic succession. The air was thick with anticipation as he walked alongside his master, Elijah, knowing that their time together was drawing to a close. The landscape around them seemed to hold its breath, as if nature itself recognized the significance of what was about to unfold. This wasn't just any ordinary day of mentorship. Through divine revelation, both men knew that Elijah's time on earth was ending. As they journeyed from Gilgal, Elijah repeatedly tested his protégé's determination, telling him to stay behind at various points, first at Bethel, then at Jericho, and finally at the Jordan River. But each time, Elisha responded with unwavering resolve. "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." The significance of this journey wasn't lost on the other prophets who watched from a distance. They too knew something extraordinary was about to happen. The tension built with each step, each city, each refusal to stay behind. Elijah's persistence wasn't mere stubbornness. It was a demonstration of his deep understanding of the moment's importance and his commitment to his calling. Then came the pivotal moment at the Jordan River. In a display of divine power that echoed Moses' parting of the Red Sea, Elijah took his cloak, struck the water, and the river parted, allowing them to cross on dry ground. This miraculous crossing served as both a reminder of God's historic dealings with Israel and a prelude to what was about to unfold. It was then that Elijah turned to his faithful disciple with an extraordinary offer. "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you." This wasn't just a mentor's final gesture. It was a divine opportunity, A moment where heaven seemed to pause, waiting for Elisha's response. Waiting for Elisha's response. Elijah's request was bold and unprecedented. Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me. In the context of ancient Israel, the double portion was the inheritance right of the firstborn son, twice the share given to other heirs. By asking for a double portion of Elijah's spirit, Elijah wasn't being greedy. He was claiming his position as the spiritual firstborn, the primary heir to Elijah's prophetic ministry. Elijah's response was both cautionary and promising. You have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if not, it shall not be so. The condition was set. Elijah's spiritual inheritance would depend on his ability to witness Elijah's departure. What followed was one of the most spectacular scenes in biblical history. As they continued walking and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared, separating the two men. In a whirlwind of divine glory, Elijah was taken up into heaven. Elisha, witnessing this extraordinary sight, cried out, My father, my father, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." His cry reflected both personal loss and national significance. He recognized that Elijah's departure represented the loss of Israel's spiritual defense force. But amidst this dramatic scene, something profound occurred. Elijah's cloak fell from him as he ascended, and Elisha picked it up, a physical symbol of the spiritual mantle that had been transferred. Without hesitation, Elisha returned to the Jordan River, struck the water with the cloak, and called out, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The waters parted just as they had for his master, confirming that his bold request had been granted. The significance of this double portion would soon become evident. Throughout his ministry, Elisha would perform twice as many recorded miracles as his predecessor, from healing bitter waters to raising the dead, from multiplying food to curing leprosy. The power that rested upon him would impact both individuals and nations, demonstrating that his audacious request had indeed been honored by God. As we witness the unfolding of this extraordinary transfer of power, we can't help but wonder, what drives someone to seek not just continuation, but multiplication of spiritual authority? The answer lies in understanding that Elisha's request wasn't about personal glory. It was about having the capacity to meet the enormous challenges that lay ahead in his calling to serve God's people. With this divine empowerment secured, Elisha was ready to embark on a ministry that would touch both the mighty and the humble, bringing healing, hope, and divine intervention to a nation in need. But even as he stepped into this new level of spiritual authority, he could hardly have imagined how God would use him to perform miracles that would demonstrate both divine power and divine compassion. As we'll see in the miracles that followed, this double portion of spiritual power wasn't just for show. It would be used to meet real human needs and demonstrate God's care for his people in ways that would astonish both the powerful and the humble alike. Part 3. Miracles of Compassion. Have you ever wondered what truly reveals the heart of a prophet? What demonstrates divine power more? The ability to counsel kings and command armies, or the compassion to help a desperate widow? How does God's power manifest in the seemingly small moments of everyday life? In the midst of Elijah's powerful ministry, we find some of the most touching demonstrations of divine compassion. These miracles, while perhaps less politically significant than his dealings with kings, reveal the true nature of God's heart through his prophet. Consider the story of the widow, whose desperate cry echoes through time. "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. The creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves." 2 Kings 4:1. In ancient Israel, creditors could legally claim children as payment for debts, a practice that, while legal, often tore families apart. This widow, already bearing the weight of losing her husband, now faced the unbearable prospect of losing her sons. Elisha's response reveals the intimate nature of God's care. Instead of dismissing her with platitudes or turning to more important matters, he asks a simple yet profound question. "What do you have in your house?" Her answer, "Just a jar of oil," seemed insignificant. But in God's economy, the smallest resources can become the source of greatest abundance. What follows is nothing short of extraordinary. Under Elijah's direction, the widow borrows empty vessels from her neighbors. Not just a few, but many. Behind closed doors, a miracle unfolds doors. A miracle unfolds as she pours from her small jar. The oil keeps flowing, filling vessel after vessel, until there are no more containers to fill. This wasn't just a demonstration of divine power. It was an intimate expression of God's provision for a family in crisis. But the miracles of compassion don't end there. In Shunem, we encounter a wealthy woman who shows kindness to Elisha by preparing a special room for his visits. Her generosity prompts the prophet to ask what he can do for her in return. Though she asks for nothing, Elisha discerns her deepest desire, a child, and prophesies her conception. The joy of this miracle, however, turns to tragedy when the child suddenly dies years later. The mother's response reveals her extraordinary faith. She lays her dead son on Elijah's bed and rushes to find the prophet, declaring with stubborn hope, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." 2 Kings 4:30. Her persistence mirrors the desperate faith that often precedes miraculous intervention. Then there's the healing of Naaman, the Syrian commander. Despite his power and prestige, leprosy made him an outcast. The cure came through the most unlikely sources: a captured Israelite servant girl's suggestion and Elisha's seemingly simple instruction to wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Naaman's initial rage at the simplicity of the solution reveals how often we complicate God's work in our lives. These miracles share a common thread. They demonstrate God's concern for individual suffering, regardless of social status. Whether a destitute widow, a wealthy woman, or a foreign military commander, each received divine attention through Elisha's ministry. Each miracle required faith, obedience, and often challenged the recipient's expectations of how God would work. The impact of these compassionate miracles extended far beyond the immediate recipients. The widow's sons remained free. The Shunammite woman's faith became legendary, and Naaman's healing led to his conversion, declaring, "Now I know that there is no God in all the earth, but in Israel." 2 Kings 5:15. Yet, even as these personal miracles demonstrated God's intimate care for individuals, greater challenges loomed on the horizon. For while Elisha's ministry brought hope to individuals, the nation of Israel faced increasing threats that would require divine intervention on a much larger scale. As we'll see, the same God who multiplied oil for a widow would soon demonstrate his power in ways that would shape the destiny of nations. As these miracles of compassion rippled through individual lives, dark clouds gathered over Israel's political landscape. The same prophet who raised the dead and healed the sick would soon find himself at the center of international intrigue, where his gift of prophecy would become a weapon more powerful than any army. Part 4. Prophet to Nations. How does a prophet's influence extend beyond religious matters to shape the destiny of nations? What happens when divine authority meets political power? And how did Elijah's ministry demonstrate God's sovereignty over not just individuals, but entire kingdoms? In the tumultuous period of Israel's history, Elisha emerged as more than just a spiritual leader. He became a pivotal figure in international affairs. The political landscape was complex. Israel found itself caught between powerful neighbors, particularly Syria, while dealing with internal struggles and spiritual decline. It was during this critical time that Elijah's prophetic ministry took on a dimension that would impact the course of nations. One of the most dramatic demonstrations of Elijah's international influence occurred during a tense military confrontation with Syria. King Ben-Hadad of Syria, frustrated by Israel's repeated escape from his military ambushes, discovered that Elisha was supernaturally revealing his war plans to the king of Israel. In 2 Kings 6, we find a remarkable account of how the Syrian king, enraged by this divine intervention, sent a massive army to capture one man, the prophet Elisha. Picture the scene in Dothan. The morning sun reveals an entire army surrounding the city, their weapons gleaming, their chariots positioned for battle. Elisha's servant, upon seeing this overwhelming force, is gripped by terror. "Alas, my master," he cries out, "what shall we do?" But Elisha's response reveals a reality beyond physical sight. "Do not fear," he calmly assures his servant, "for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then comes one of the most extraordinary moments in biblical history. Elisha prays, "Lord, open his eyes that he may see." Suddenly the servant's spiritual eyes are opened, and he beholds an astonishing sight. The mountain full of horses and chariots of fire surrounding Elisha. This heavenly army, invisible to natural eyes but more powerful than any earthly force, demonstrated God's supernatural protection of his prophet. What follows is even more remarkable. Instead of fleeing or fighting, Elisha prays for the Syrian army to be struck with blindness. Then, in an unexpected turn of events, he personally leads the blinded army straight into Samaria, the capital of Israel. When their eyes are opened, they find themselves trapped in the heart of enemy territory. But here's where Elisha's wisdom and God's mercy shine through. When the king of Israel eagerly asks, "My father, shall I kill them?" Elisha demonstrates a higher form of warfare. He instructs the king to feed them instead and send them home in peace. This act of mercy had such a profound impact that, as scripture records, the bands of Syria came no more into the land of Israel. This wasn't Elisha's only interaction with Syria. Later, when King Ben-Hadad fell ill, he sent his trusted officer Hazael to consult Elisha about his recovery. In this encounter, Elisha, with tears in his eyes, revealed to Hazael that he would become king of Syria, but would bring great suffering to Israel. This prophecy would soon be fulfilled, demonstrating Elisha's role in shaping not only Israel's future, but also the succession of foreign powers. Elijah's influence extended to multiple kings and kingdoms. He counseled kings of Israel, Judah, and even foreign nations. His prophecies determined military strategies, his words influenced international relations, and his actions demonstrated God's sovereignty over all nations. Through him, we see how spiritual authority, when backed by divine power, transcends political boundaries and earthly authority. Yet, even as Elisha shaped the destiny of nations, his most extraordinary demonstration of divine power was yet to come. For while his earthly ministry would eventually end, God's power working through him would extend beyond the grave itself, setting the stage for one of the most remarkable miracles in biblical history. This prophet's ability to influence nations reminds us that God's authority knows no boundaries, geographic, political, or even temporal. Through Elisha, we see how divine power can work through one faithful servant to impact not just individuals or communities, but entire nations and generations to come. Part 5. The Final Miracle. Power Beyond Death. Have you ever wondered about the extent of God's power working through his prophets? Could divine authority extend beyond the grave itself? What happens when death meets divine purpose? In the annals of biblical history, few accounts capture the imagination, quite like Elisha's final miracle, a demonstration of divine power that transcended the boundary between life and death. This extraordinary event occurred in a time of significant turmoil for Israel, when Moabite raiders regularly threatened the land's peace and security. Picture the scene. A group of Israelites, their faces etched with grief, are carrying a man to his final resting place. The atmosphere is tense with both sorrow and fear, as Moabite raiders have been spotted in the vicinity. The funeral procession moves with urgency through the countryside, the mourners constantly glancing over their shoulders for signs of danger. Suddenly, The lookout spots a band of raiders approaching. Panic erupts among the funeral party. In their haste to flee from the impending danger, they make a quick decision. They need to dispose of the body immediately. As Providence would have it, they are near the tomb of Elisha, who had died not long before. The burial site of this great prophet of Israel, carved into the rock as was custom, becomes their immediate solution. 2 Kings 13:20. One captures this dramatic moment with stark simplicity. Once, while some Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders. So they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. Imagine the astonishment of those present. One moment they're hastily disposing of a body in fear for their lives. The next, they're witnessing something unprecedented. A dead man springing to life upon contact with the prophet's remains. The scene must have been extraordinary. The previously lifeless body suddenly animated. The man standing upright in the tomb, probably as shocked as the witnesses themselves. This miracle was particularly significant because it occurred when Israel was at a low point spiritually. King Joash, though he had shown respect for Elisha during the prophet's final days, had not fully followed the Lord. The nation faced regular threats from surrounding enemies, and their commitment to God had waned. Yet even in this context of decline, God demonstrated that his power remained active through the legacy of his faithful servant. The theological implications of this miracle are profound. First, it validated everything Elisha had prophesied and demonstrated during his lifetime. Even in death, his connection to divine power remained unbroken. Second, it served as a powerful reminder to Israel that God's power was not limited by human constraints, not even by death itself. This miracle foreshadowed an even greater truth that would be fully revealed in the New Testament, the ultimate victory over death through resurrection. But there's more to consider here. Why did God choose this particular moment, this specific way to demonstrate his power? The timing seems deliberately orchestrated to make a statement. When Israel's faith was wavering, when foreign raiders threatened their security, God used even the bones of his prophet to demonstrate that his power remained present and active among his people. This event stands unique in Scripture. Nowhere else do we find an account of someone being resurrected through contact with a prophet's remains. It serves as a powerful bookend to Elisha's ministry, which began with his request for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. That his very bones could transmit life, giving power, suggests that God had indeed honored that bold request abundantly. What makes this miracle particularly remarkable is how it continues to speak to us today. In an age where we often question the limits of divine intervention, this account reminds us that God's power knows no bounds. It challenges our tendency to place limits on what God can do, even through those who have faithfully served him. The story resonates beyond its historical context, pointing to deeper spiritual truths. Just as Elisha's physical remains carried power that could restore life, the legacy of faithful servants of God continues to impact lives long after they've departed. It stands as a testament to the enduring nature of God's work through his chosen vessels. This extraordinary event marked not just the final miracle in Elijah's story, but also served as a powerful exclamation point to a life devoted to demonstrating God's power. Yet even this remarkable display of divine power points forward to an even greater truth, that God's ultimate purpose extends beyond any single prophet or miracle, reaching toward his grand plan for humanity's redemption. As we reflect on this incredible account, we're left to wonder, how does this demonstration of God's power challenge our own expectations of divine intervention? What does it tell us about the lasting impact of a life devoted to God's purposes? Let's transition from this extraordinary demonstration of power beyond death to consider how Elisha's entire ministry continues to impact and inspire believers today. Conclusion: the enduring impact. As we conclude our exploration of Elijah's remarkable journey, we find ourselves standing at the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern relevance. The story of this extraordinary prophet, from his humble beginnings behind a plow to his final miracle beyond the grave, offers us profound insights that resonate powerfully in our own time. Consider how Elisha's journey speaks to our deepest questions about purpose and potential. Here was a man who started as an ordinary farmer, yet through divine calling and unwavering commitment, became a channel of extraordinary power. His story challenges our assumptions about human limitations and divine possibilities. What might this mean for your own journey of faith and purpose? The enduring impact of Elijah's ministry extends far beyond the miraculous events we've explored. It demonstrates fundamental truths about divine faithfulness, human potential, and the transformative power of complete surrender to God's purposes. Through Elisha, we see how God works, not just through dramatic interventions, but through the patient development of character and the steady building of faith. Perhaps most striking is how Elisha's story continues to challenge and inspire us today. In an age of skepticism and self-reliance, his life reminds us that true power often flows through unexpected channels. His journey from the fields to national prominence speaks to anyone who has ever questioned whether God could use them for significant purposes. But this isn't just a story to admire from a distance. It presents us with compelling questions. What might happen if we, like Elisha, were willing to burn our plows, to fully commit to God's calling? How might our lives change if we dared to ask for a double portion of spiritual power? What would it look like to live with such complete trust in divine provision? I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of Elijah's story resonates most deeply with your own journey? How has God worked through unexpected circumstances in your life? If you've experienced a moment where God turned your ordinary into extraordinary, share your story by typing double in the comments. Let's inspire each other with testimonies of God's faithfulness. This exploration of Elijah's life reminds us that God's power isn't confined to ancient history. It's as present and active today as it was when Elisha walked the earth. The question isn't whether God can work powerfully through ordinary people. The question is whether we're willing to be those people. Before we part, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through one of Scripture's most compelling narratives. If you found value in these insights, please consider subscribing to our channel for more biblical explorations that bridge ancient wisdom with contemporary life. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss our next deep dive into the transformative stories of Scripture. Remember, just as Elijah's influence extended beyond his lifetime, your own journey of faith might impact people in ways you never imagined. The power that worked through Elisha is still active today, waiting to work through willing vessels like you. Until next time, may you walk in the confidence that the God who transformed an ordinary farmer into one of history's most powerful prophets is still in the business of doing extraordinary things through ordinary people. God bless you, and I'll see you in our next exploration of Scripture's timeless truths.